Oh my gosh, look at this! I'm back with a return now officially to the Monsterverse franchise. Oh, yes. Finally, it is happening. I know it's been, what, like a year and a half now, at least, since I reviewed Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019. So finally, I am now reviewing the fourth entry in the series. And it is the first of two movies that feature, you know, kaiju history's biggest profile names in the entire history of monster movies. Godzilla and King Kong. I mean, the title Godzilla versus Kong couldn't be more on the nose than it really is. And yeah, I've been very much anticipating doing this review because I feel like, my last movie review was a little bit heavy and I felt, there were some demons that needed to be exorcised there. But I wanted to come back to reviewing movies that are just for fun. And these particular movies from Warner Brothers and Legendary Studios have just been awesome to cover so far. So this movie was the top grossing film of 2021. Certainly for a movie that was shown during the pandemic, in which people were either, going to the theaters to see it, or they would stream it on HBO Max. That was actually how I was first introduced to this movie. Man, that was already 5 years ago already. Yeah, as a matter of fact, at the time, I missed out on Kong Skull Island and Godzilla King of the Monsters. I had only seen the Gareth Edwards Godzilla movie from 2014. And so with that 7 year gap, it was quite a surprise to see, some new and interesting and rather colorful and vibrant developments made to this franchise so far, which is basically now at this point become like the monster equivalent to the Marvel franchise, the MCU. So this would mark a turning point, Godzilla versus Kong, in that it would be the first in an apparent trilogy of movies featuring Godzilla and Kong being the lead kaiju. So far we have this Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, which would come out 3 years later. And currently there is the third movie in the trilogy is slated for a 2027 release called Godzilla Kong Supernova. It's also the first to have a more kid-friendly appeal. It's lighthearted, it's funny, it's bombastic, it's almost like watching one of the James Gunn Scooby-Doo movies. And really, it has a Saturday morning cartoon feel to it. The new Empire, in particular, would lean into that even more. Oh, yeah, just wait till you hear my thoughts when I review that movie next, because I am going to be doing these back to back. And even though there are some familiar characters coming back from 2019's King of the Monsters, like Kyle Chandler and Millie Bobby Brown, love that she came back. There's also a brand new cast of great, great actors. One actor in particular that I was so thrilled to see was Alexander Skarsgård. Eric fucking Northman from True Blood himself is in this movie. And don't forget, he also played Tarzan as well. So his character is very important to this film because of his work with Monarch and a book on quantum physics that he wrote related to the history of Hollow Earth. So, yeah, this movie is going to be all about Hollow Earth. It's expanding upon that plot element that was first explored in Kong Skull Island. And the stuff that Alexander Skarsgård's character has to talk about is quite mind-boggling, especially when he talks about, the Einstein Rosenberg like bridge of, the zero gravity inversion that happens, when traveling through one side of the earth to the other and, getting to the core of the earth in between, which is where Hollow Earth is. Rebecca Hall is in this movie as well, and she's always really fun. Yaisa Gonzalez is in here as well. Love that girl. But most importantly is, and I do believe that this is her debut acting role here, a very special child star in this film named Kaylee Hottle. Kaylee Hottle, who plays a member of the Iwi tribe, first introduced in Kong Skull Island as well. Her name is Gia, Jia. She she was really sweet in this movie. Oh my gosh, she is like a cute little Buddha, earth child type of character that just embodies everything that is so innocent and eternally young about, being in touch with the earth and seeing it for all of its sacredness, like feeling, the life force of all living beings. And she has that rapport with Kong in spades. It was really nice as well seeing this actress, considering that her deafness, she is deaf in real life, but that handicap of hers turned out to be a gift, lending itself to her performance as a girl who communicates in sign language to Kong. I just love, that we're living in a time where, you know, people with disabilities are being given a chance to really show, the gifts that actually come with their disability. Um, and you know it's yeah, that'll obviously be a whole other topic in itself sometime. Maybe I'll review The Social Network with Jesse Eisenberg to show how I personally believe that he's an actor who has autism just like I do. That would definitely be a good exploration, of real life autistic people who are acting. The term being used is profound autistics. So now, in typical integrating real perspective fashion, as I've been doing, going on almost 3 years now since I started this channel, I am going to focus on the road less traveled in reviewing these Monsterverse movies. I am going to focus on the characters and their story arcs within the movie's near 2 hour runtime. These are still movies with actors I love, and they play characters who are full blooded, colorful, and have multiple dimensions to them. They are not paper cut caricatures that are just meant to be in the background, and it's just like, oh, we just want to focus on the monsters. We want to focus on them destroying cities. Blah 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 blah. No, 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 no. That's not my style. These movies are way more than that. And all that other stuff that you care about with these movies is all wallpaper. Okay? It's all wallpaper. These movies have great stories. They have great characters. I'm probably 1 in 50 people in the whole world who does this. And I wear my badge of honor proudly to advocate for the stars putting in their 110% fashion, 110% passion, especially Alexander Skarsgård. I mean, one of the best Swedish actors that I know of living today, right up there with Kirsten Dunst. So, this film starts out in a rather comically deceptive way in which we begin our story again, in which, we have the subtitle saying, meanwhile, on Skull Island, yeah, we're back on Skull Island again for the first time since that 2017 movie. But historically and chronologically, by the Monsterverse standards, it's actually nearly 50 years later. This is the present day. Well, 2021, when the movie came out. So it's no longer 1973. So this is definitely, nearly half a century after the Vietnam or post-Vietnam War setting of the 2017 movie that had John Goodman and Brie Larson and yeah. So anyways, in this movie, Kong is waking up. It's a beautiful morning. He takes a shower underneath the waterfall. Gia comes to greet him as the sun rises, holding a new doll that she made for him. It is like a hippie paradise where human and ape live in harmony. Now, the interesting thing to take note of the fact that I just got to get the director's name. Adam Wingard directs this movie as well as the new Empire, is that I have come to see him as the Cameron Crowe of the Monsterverse films. I've talked about Cameron Crowe a little bit in the past and how he has a way of just like matching up certain beats of the story with like his favorite songs. Adam Wingard does the same thing here. Like he starts out with like a country song, like some Hank Williams song or whatever to start out the movie. I know like one of the big um shining soundtrack moments that defines this film is the use of the Bangles song "The Air That I Breathe," which eerily enough was also used in the A24 movie Heretic, but that's besides the point. I digress. So anyways, yeah, the choice of music that Adam Wingard uses for this movie is quite interesting. And I'm just gonna say it right now, but like, he even uses a Kiss song in the new Empire. And I'll obviously get more to that once I get around to that review. But yeah, he definitely has good taste, that's for sure. And he definitely wanted to make this movie and the new Empire, more colorful, more like carnivalesque spectacles rather than, just like your standard monster movies, which, shows how this film is held in stark contrast to all the other Godzilla movies that came before. Well, the Godzilla and Kong movies that came before, because those movies were more serious, they were more gritty. But here, it's just about, let's just sit back and, have a have an IPA and watch the sunrise, and even have a hot girl with us, to you know sit with me while listening to some beautiful music and watching, some kaiju monsters just happy in their habitats. At least on the Kong side of the story. I obviously haven't gotten into Godzilla yet. So now to get back to the narrative here of this film, what happens next is that Kong strips a tree of its branches and decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to take this tree and I'm going to do some spear throwing for sport to start this day. And that's when the fourth wall is broken. Kablooey! It hits, crashes into a part of what we discover is a great dome. He takes out a part of this holographic grid that Monarch has constructed as a safe haven for Kong away from Godzilla. The reason being because, they're both such old nemesis, and that's obvious, just going back to the 1962 King Kong versus Godzilla from the Toho side of the Godzilla franchise. It's pretty obvious why you're now seeing Kong in a monarch environment here. He's being, supervised and cared for. Um, he's got like a family of humans that are making sure that he's got everything that he needs and that he's happy. Except that he's not. See, the deal is Kong is all alone, and Gia is the last surviving member of the Iwi tribe. And Kong has been wanting to find a family again that would give him the official title of king. I believe it was that the Iwi tribe was wiped out on Skull Island, between the events of the 2017 movie, which was set in 1973, and present day 2021. So he's been, he was exalted as a king by this tribe who, in the Kong Skull Island movie, they were only talking about Hollow Earth as a myth in that film. Well, so here in this movie, Hollow Earth is actually going to be revealed. The curtain is going to be pulled back this time, so as to actually show you what Hollow Earth looks like. And so that being the case, because Kong himself is trying to find his home, his, you know, basically, migrate to a home that is a home of his origin, basically, going back in time and finding his origins. He's about to be launched on an unexpected quest when Alexander Skarsgård's character, Dr. Nathan Lind, comes into the picture. Now, I have to go off on a tangent a little here to describe how Alexander Skarsgård conceived of his Nathan Lind character, the input that he actually put into shaping him. So there's obvious references to Romancing the Stone and Indiana Jones in his character, the man who wrote the book about Hollow Earth. But the one influence that really stands out here is the Lethal Weapon franchise. And it was those movies that crafted the Maverick side of his persona. And, in a way, Kong reflects some of Nathan's traits, especially in one big way. Now, if you're at all familiar with the classic buddy cop films that starred Mel Gibson and Danny Glover from 1987 to 1998, you'll recall the scene in the second Lethal Weapon movie where Riggs, played by Mel Gibson, plays this game at the police station where a bunch of his fellow lieutenants dare him to get out of a straitjacket. Now, to do so, Riggs has to pop one of his shoulders out of his socket. And sure enough, he slips out of it like a glove. But then he tells his friends, hey, it doesn't hurt as much when I pop it out. Just wait till you see when I have to pop it back in, pop it back in place. And in a rather masochistic gesture that still has the audience laughing because, well, we feel for the poor guy, he slams his shoulder against the cubicle wall, showing a mix of pain and relief as he completes his cycle of convalescence. And it's just like, okay, what's the next assignment for for today, Murtaugh? Well, Kong does something exactly like that in a scene where Nathan has to revive him so as to get Kong back into battle again. Now, this was director Adam Wingard's idea. The scene where Kong slams his shoulder against a building, and at this point, he's in Hong Kong. He did it the same way that Martin Riggs did as well. So as it turns out, Lethal Weapon 2 is a favorite that both Alexander and director Adam Wingard have in common. But now we have to get to the next part of the story before I get more into Nathan, because he doesn't make his presence just yet. No. So after being introduced to Gia and Rebecca Hall's character, the name will come to me in just a little bit. We are introduced to a whistleblower named Bernie Hayes, who runs a podcast called Titan Truth. Now, this dude is quite a character. He actually reminds me of someone from the movie K-Pax. You remember that movie? Okay, so Saul Williams stars in that movie, co-stars in that movie, playing a guy named, wait for this, you're gonna flip out here, Ernie. Now tell me that isn't a coincidence and that Adam Wingard subtly slipped a K-Pax uh, reference right there. uh, Anyways, if you get the chance, look up the Wikipedia entry on K-Pax and look up Saul Williams' character and find some YouTube videos on him. Trust me, you'll notice how similar he is to Brian Tyree Henry's character as Bernie Hayes. Because Bernie Hayes is one of these conspiracy nuts who is trying to expose some nefarious stuff that's going on at Apex Cybernetics. He like even goes in pretending to be like a janitor. And he goes up to this guy who's about to eat an apple and says, "No, don't eat that. There's like a million different bad chemicals in there," and like some other stupid shit. When I first was introduced to his character, I was just wanting to blindfold myself and plug my ears because I could not stand the sight of this character. But, then after seeing him in The New Empire, which would come out 3 years after this, he lightened up a little bit more and he actually became a warm and loving and funny character that I could relate to. But here, he is just obnoxious. Oof. Ooh, 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 is he just hard to watch? Anyways, Bernie senses something isn't right with Apex Cybernetics. Honestly, he is the one weak link of this movie because of his delusions of grandeur performance and overly grandiose, over the top conspiracy histrionics, just like bantering random lines like, "Hey, do you want some hand sanitizer? Don't eat that apple." So he works deep cover at Apex Cybernetics to expose some espionage conspiracy, and it turns out that the late Dr. Ishiro Serizawa's son, Ren, is in on it. Ken Watanabe played Ishiro Serizawa from, with the first and the third Monsterverse movies. Really miss that guy. But anyways, that part was interesting due to some previous familial ties, family ties with the first and the third Monsterverse movies. So that was cool. Well, but then, there's also some neo-Nazi crap thrown in there, like fluoride being used in the water main supply to make people compliant and docile, and, some further BS about Bernie finding it necessary to shower with bleach to destroy any organic tracking technology. Gosh, please, somebody give me some ibuprofen. This guy is a walking headache. Ugh. But then Godzilla mysteriously shows up. And once again, he's a baddie. Oh, yeah. He starts attacking Apex Cybernetics, which now creates mass confusion about those who were getting used to him being the savior. And so then news gets around to Maddie, who is first shown now sitting in her high school class. And unfortunately, she's a fan of Bernie's podcast too. Yeah, you see her listening to his podcast. Ugh. In fact, I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. The one major hemorrhoid about Maddie in this movie is when her and one of her best friends, Josh, are talking about this guy. And, he's asking her, like what it is about Bernie that she really, really likes, questioning, just his lifestyle, his behavior, and all that. And Maddie's response, I think it's romantic. And then, of course, Josh's response, um, which, he says in a soliloquy performance is, I'll never understand women. Get me off this planet. Right, so let's get back on track to the good stuff regarding Maddie's character returning to the Monsterverse fold. Maddie goes to visit her dad, Dr. Mark Russell, played once again by Kyle Chandler, in more of a guest star appearance, so he has more reduced time on screen for this movie. Maddie is genuinely concerned about this jarring 180 that Godzilla has taken and is looking for help and wisdom from her dad to explain why, to understand why this sudden chimera effect. As an animal behavior and communication specialist, all Mark has to say is what he learned from the late Ishiro Serizawa. It's just a bad day in the viscera of Mother Nature. Humans have had to learn that when monsters are running amok, that all we can do is get out of the way and let them do their business. We have to learn to coexist along with Godzilla and other kaiju, which is to say that he doesn't help Maddie. And so she ends up enlisting her friend Josh to go on a road trip to find Bernie. And in a clever soundtrack synchronization to match the beat of the scene change, Josh is playing Breaking the Law by Judas Priest. Breaking the law, breaking the law. Boy, that song was popular when I was in high school. And this song is playing as Josh's own version of the Mystery Machine pulls up in front of the Russell's house. Yep, Told you that this would turn into a Scooby-Doo parody. I wonder if James Gunn and Adam Wingard happen to be close cousins, but they just don't know it yet. Separated at birth. Getting back to Maddie's train of thought, as her and Josh are about ready to go out in search for Bernie, she must have been thinking, "Oh, I better take a bleach shower before we go out on our quest." Yeah, she might have well just said that too. But no, instead, they go to an Asian bleach market pretending that they actually want to buy some of that product, but they're actually just trying to get Bernie's address. Josh even stupidly gives $20 to the guy saying that he'd buy candy before, he finally, lets out the information on where Bernie's located. Anyhow, let me switch back to Nathan Lind. So, Nathan used to work for Monarch, and because his book on the Hollow Earth, see picture here, is now getting attention from Ren Serizawa and Walter Simmons from Apex Cybernetics, Nathan is being summoned to unite with his old coworker, Dr. Eileen Andrews, played by the flowery beauty Rebecca Hall, who is super hot as always. I was just watching Iron Man 3 recently. She has that Letitia Sadier lookalike profile to her. So Eileen is basically Gia's adopted mother who had taken her under her wing. And correspondingly, she's been a den mother for Kong with the Kong Island holographic dome station that Monarch erected for him to be his nursery. Yeah. And I had to do some further digging here, but geographically, I originally thought that the Monarch base Eileen was keeping Kong and Gia at was like Florida or, the Bahamas or Brazil, some sort of similar environment to Skull Island, but it is, in fact, Skull Island, or what remains of it, which just shows that this is a direct link to the aftermath of King Ghidorah's wrath in the 2019 movie, which had now left behind this perpetual storm from the three-headed monsters terraforming, which has now gradually ravaged what was once beautiful about Skull Island and turning it into an uninhabitable wasteland. That's why Monarch created that holographic dome, to at least retain some imprint of Kong's homeland, so that he would feel safe, so that he would be grounded and happy and prosper. When Nathan Lind re enters her life, he says that he needs Kong's help to journey into Hollow Earth. Nathan's talk with Walter and Ren was due to a resurgence of interest in his book on Hollow Earth, especially the gravity inversion, which is basically a paradoxical bridge that balances out the poles, the north and south poles of the Earth, so that people can journey from the surface deep into the inner world that lies beneath. Apparently, Walter and Ren say they discovered an energy signature almost identical to Godzilla, and that Nathan believes this to prove a genetic memory that all monsters want to find their evolutionary source. And given that Kong has been homesick for a long time, eager to search for his tribe, his family who may have been forgotten to history, this empathy that Nathan has for Kong is what motivates him to persuade Eileen to then go into the Hollow Earth. She doesn't like this idea, of course, at first, and she definitely has his suspicions about Nathan's zealotry, other than, of course, the obvious fact that she wants to protect Kong from Godzilla. But then Walter's daughter, Maya, played by Eiza Gonzalez, I always have to think twice about how to pronounce her first name. Brings along this new vehicle known as the Hollow Earth Aerial Vehicle, or HEAVE for short. This vehicle can help pass through the gravity inversion safely, although it will still feel like an intense light speed roller coaster ride for humans. Kong, on the other hand, would have no problem going into the Hollow Earth, going through the gravity inversion. So that's the plan, and thus begins the journey where Dr. Andrews and Gia leave on a freight ship liner with Kong on board, and with Nathan and Maya and a bunch of other people on this team. I may have mentioned that Kong actually speaks to Gia's language, but is at one point there is one point late at night where where she's out calming down Kong, who is scared. It's pouring rain at night, and there's one point where Eileen comes outside and is obviously concerned for Gia. Um, and it's pretty obvious that Kong even expresses his sorrow and purrs out the word home. And this is the first time that both Eileen and Gia are able to sense that Kong really does have the intelligence to be able to speak to humans. Like, even to the point where it's like both Gia and Kong are fused together as one consciousness. It's like each has a little bit of the other in their DNA. And it's a very powerful moment right there where it's like, even Maya is stunned herself, and she's pretty much um, closed-minded the whole time, to say the least. Nathan, of course, is just absolutely dazzled by the whole sight. But, anyways, this just indicates how Kong is actually more of a social creature than Godzilla is. And speaking of Godzilla, next day, yep, he shows up because it was inevitable. And he begins attacking the brigade of ships out on the ocean while making his way towards Kong. Nathan at one point even tells everyone to shut off all power while Kong plays dead. And even though Godzilla ends up destroying at least maybe two or three of these freightliners, he does end up going in the other direction. Now, as you noticed, there has been a recurring pattern throughout these Monsterverse movies where there is actually at least two or three stories going on, and the characters in each of their arcs almost never intersect at all. So, for that reason, I'm going to be abbreviating each story arc to prevent this review from getting too long and convoluted. So, to get back to Maddie, Josh, and Bernie, they discover that a remaining head from King Ghidorah from the 2019 movie, and by the way, Josh still refers to him as Monster Zero, is being harvested for its brain and nervous system capabilities, and that Ren, Serizawa, and Walter developed this special technology for him to sit in the chair with a Cerebro type headset in which Ren is the user plugged into a trance state, which gets a network link started between him and Ghidorah's neural pathways towards this supercomputer. And this supercomputer reveals itself to be the power station for another resurrected kaiju, Mechagodzilla. Haha. And this threads back to Kong's storyline because when he travels to Middle Earth, Maya, as it's revealed, wants the big ape to lead the team to a spot where she uses a drone hidden inside one of the heaves to extract a sample of this nuclear material which can help power up Mechagodzilla and make it sentient to give it consciousness. By the way, Mechagodzilla has a very strange model to him compared to the Mechagodzilla that I have known from the 70s and the two movies from the 1970s and the 1993 movie that he was in. Because he always stood up vertically and, had almost like a Megazord, Power Rangers character type of stature to him when he stood. Here, there's something almost serpentine-like about the way that Mechagodzilla moves, especially, his spines on his back. There's just a lot more wiggliness, a lot more wriggling and, you know, writhing in the way he moves. I'm surprised, that he hasn't even attempted to like move on his belly, in the same way that like Varan would. But anyways, um, so as I was saying, um, as far as the connection then to um, Apex Cybernetics, this explains then why Godzilla appears initially once again to be a bad guy because he's being controlled by Walter and Ren, albeit vicariously. And by vicariously, I mean that while these two men were working on Mechagodzilla in secret, Godzilla was sensing its energy signature throughout the movie, which I guess upset his brainwave patterns, which then caused him to regress back to being the baddie that he appeared to be. And Maddie, of course, figures this out. She knows, that this definitely isn't Godzilla. This, that he is being preyed upon by, men that are obviously looking to, they're obviously looking to, you know, dominate the earth by having Mechagodzilla take out the two Alpha Titans. Kind of like, in a sense, it's sort of like how I had recently rewatched Jurassic Park Dominion. The giant locusts, how they're like brought back into the Earth's ecosystem, even though they have been extinct for so many millennia. Um, and that the plan was to like eat all the Earth's food supplies so as to basically allow the dinosaurs to come and dominate the Earth again. Um, in place of humans. So basically, that's what Walter and Ren are doing here by using Mechagodzilla to essentially, terraform Earth. Um, Basically, continuing the work that King Ghidorah had started in the previous film before it was taken out by Godzilla. And so, um, just like I said, Godzilla's, brainwave patterns caused him to go on a rampage at Apex. And but eventually Godzilla and Kong do end up having to throw off their differences and band together to take out Mechagodzilla. Eventually, they become allies. And all this happens with a climactic monster showdown in Hong Kong. And it happens that Maddie's father is also stationed there at the same time, which is when they get reunited again. Even though they never end up meeting Nathan, Eileen, and Gia. Their storylines never touch. So, anyways, that just leaves my outline of Hollow Earth as like the missing piece here to this movie that I haven't gotten into. Now, this is quite a visual feast to gaze upon. This is where we are introduced to a variety of new creatures and some gorgeous plant life that honestly makes everything look very pretty, very utopian like for King Kong. And there's even floating rocks that look like the Ethereum from Castle in the Sky. You remember those glowing like lapis lazuli quartz diamond type crystals that are discovered in that cave at one point in the movie? Yeah, they're like those. It is such a dazzling sight too when coming across that temple that Kong enters and claims the special axe, which when powered by the nuclear energy of the core, it becomes this super weapon that can deflect back any atomic energy blasted at it. And boy, does it slice through anything with lightning charge precision. I mean, just look at how he turns Mechagodzilla into scrap metal. So that's really all that I'm going to say about Hollow Earth in this review. The next Godzilla Kong movie that I'm going to be reviewing after this, I will be going more into the ecology and the anthropology of Hollow Earth because it really, really goes deeper and becomes a lot more richer in terms of the storytelling there. So there's more relevance in getting into that stuff more, um, especially since there is more of an emphasis on the monsters being the main cast in that film than the humans. So yeah, anyways, so that's my review of Godzilla vs. Kong 2021. This really was a fun movie to watch all over again. It's a vast improvement over the 2019 King of the Monsters movie. Granted, the script is a little trite at times, especially with Josh's lines. That's a character that was pretty disposable, in my opinion. But Adam Wingard was a great choice of a director because he brings his own childlike energy into the creation of this story. He's almost like Robert Rodriguez, honestly, in the way that he brings a wacky, colorful imagination to this entry in the Monsterverse franchise. Actually, at times it's almost like watching a Spy Kids movie. And that's a compliment. I love those movies, just like I also love The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Robert Rodriguez is awesome. It is interesting because this and the next entry, The New Empire, given that they're both directed by Adam Wingard, they are set in complete contrast against his other movies in his filmography, which consists of like horror and thrillers like You're Next, Death Note, and The Guest. And speaking of that latter film, there's a fun Easter egg that I'm going to share with you in my next review. But just hang tight, chill out. It will gradually be revealed. So, with all that being said, time to wrap up this review and move on to the next entry in the Monsterverse franchise. And this film has been described as a silent film, where, as I had stated before, the monsters are the main stars. Although, again, the cast still matters in that film as well. You're going to have some carryover actors and their characters that are going to be in the next film. Unfortunately, Alexander Skarsgård doesn't return, which confuses me and frustrates me, but there's still some good additions to that film that are going to be exciting to talk about. So, for now, I bid you adieu, integrating real perspective, and onwards to reviewing The New Empire. Ciao.